Football Podcast. I'm your host again, Jim Neander. All right, so we got the second half of our Week 8 review show going on today. I'm not going to waste a lot of time. We got 8 games to go over before we move into our Week 9 preview shows. And I want to get this banged out here. So let's rock. Let's go to LA, where the Los Angeles Rams took on the Cincinnati Bengals. Wasn't expected to be that competitive of a game, and it really wasn't. The Rams won 24-10. A little disappointing of an offensive output for the Rams. They did lose Brandon Cooks for the game due to concussion, but still you want to see them put up more points, and they're still struggling to get it together. We're going to start on the Cincinnati side, though, today. Let's start with Andy Dalton. And interestingly enough, he just was named as the second-string quarterback now. He has been benched, found out on his birthday. But he did have an okay game. He got a lot of garbage time yards, 329 yards and a touchdown. If you streamed him, you're okay with that performance. Unfortunately, he's not going to be streamable going forward in the near future, as far as we know. As looks like Ryan Finley's going to be taking over as the quarterback next week. So keep an eye on that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes when we get into the wide receivers here. But let's start with Joe Mixon in the backfield. So 17 carries, 66 yards, very pedestrian day. Thankfully, if you're a Joe Mixon owner and you decided to play him this week, you did get a receiving touchdown. He had 4 receptions, only 11 yards, but did get it in the end zone, and that in the end wound up saving his day. So he was fine. If you played Mixon, this was one of the very few weeks this year where you've actually been happy with the output. Unfortunately, the offensive line is awful, and that's the same thing with Andy Dalton. It's not their fault. It's also not the offensive line's fault. They've had quite a number of injuries. Things just haven't panned out. That's how it goes in the NFL. Nothing new here. But unfortunately, that's just what's been going on in Cincinnati, and they really can't get anything going with the offensive line. They can't protect the quarterback very well, and they can't really open up very many holes for the running back. So, you can still play Mixon as a volume play. He's going to get the carries. He's the number one. Giovanni Bernard only had 3 rushes, and only had 2 receptions on 2 targets. So it wasn't like Giovanni Bernard is cutting into Joe Mixon's work. It's just that they're a very bad football team. They are now 0-8. That's as bad as it gets, right? Even Miami almost won this last week. So that's pretty awful. However, if you did play your Cincinnati offensive players, you did get enough production out of them that you weren't really that upset. Tyler Boyd, 6 receptions on 9 targets, 65 yards. If you played Auden Tate, 5 receptions on a whopping 13 targets, only 65 yards. You were fine with 11.5 points in a PPR format, but with 13 targets, you're hoping that you can have a huge day. It just didn't happen here. Alex Erickson, who had the huge amount of targets last week, actually led the receivers in yards this week. 6 receptions on 7 targets, 97 yards. If you streamed him and wound up playing him, you were really happy with that. You get over 15 points out of someone that you're plugging in for a bye week or for an injury, and you're definitely happy with that. Tyler Eifert had a day. I'm sure he was started in a very, very small percentage of leagues, but 6 receptions, 74 yards on 9 targets. And if Andy Dalton were the quarterback going forward, I would say that, yes, Tyler Eifert has some value for me going forward as, maybe a fringe tight end 1. But, the unknown factor with Ryan Finley, he did look okay when he came in. He looked okay. He looked like he was going to be serviceable to a degree. That being said, I don't know that I want to really play any of these other assets outside of Joe Mixon and maybe Tyler Boyd with much lower expectations now for the time being until I see what the offense looks like. So, if I'm just giving you plain advice here, you're playing Mixon if you need to. I think there's better plays out there, but I understand he's a good volume play. Tyler Boyd is still probably the number 1 in this offense as far as targets goes, on an overall basis. So I think you play Tyler Boyd, but playing anybody else on that offense right now is risky. So let's move over to the Los Angeles Rams. Jared Goff actually had a pretty decent day, 372 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think the issue here is that the offense, once again, just didn't really look like it was flowing very well. It didn't look like they were A really cohesive unit, quite honestly. And the numbers were okay. So if you played golf, again, you weren't that happy most of the year. Maybe you pivoted away from him this week, but hopefully you didn't. You stayed with him, and you were rewarded for that. The backfield continues to be, a struggle. Todd Gurley owners, you got, I don't want to say lucky, but you got the touchdown here, and that, made it a viable day. But in all honesty, one target out of the backfield, no receptions, so no help there. Only 10 rushes, 44 yards. Without that touchdown, you're talking about a 4.5 point day, and that would really, put a hurting on your team. But you got the touchdown. The disappointing part here is that Darrell Henderson had 11 rushes for 49 yards. He had, more work. He had 3 targets. He had 2 receptions, 20 yards. And so, basically all our biggest fears were confirmed about, Todd Gurley at the beginning of this year. He's not the same kind of workhorse he has been the last couple of years. And even though he did, slip in drafts, he still didn't slip far enough for what his current production is. So, right now it's hard to call him much more than just a, low-end running back 2 most weeks. And if you're expecting that, then play him. But if you think you're going to have a lot of weeks where he's going to put up, high-end running back 1 numbers, top 3 on the week numbers, I don't see that coming for him the rest of this year. So, just keep that in mind and just, manage your expectations with Todd Gurley. So, as far as receivers go, don't manage anything with Cooper Kupp. Just keep him in your lineup. He absolutely crushed it again. 7 receptions on 10 targets, 220 yards and a touchdown. Man, 220, that's just a monster. Every time you looked up, he was making huge plays. He had that great move down to the sideline, that huge play. And, he's the number 1. I've been saying it for weeks. There's nothing else to say. He's the number 1. Brandon Cooks was the number 2. He got knocked out with another concussion. I expect him to be out at least a couple of weeks. So you'd like to think Robert Woods is the number 2, but in all honesty, 2 more targets this game, 2 receptions, 36 yards compared to Josh Reynolds, who, Josh Reynolds has flashed in the past. We've seen it when he's had opportunities, when there have been injured Rams receivers, whether it's been Cooper Kupp last year, Brandon Cooks, but when Josh Reynolds has had opportunities, he has, come up pretty big in some of those opportunities. So, 3 receptions on 8 targets, 73 yards and a touchdown. So he already had a really nice game, and there was a lot of missed targets there. So, Robert Woods owners, which I'm one, I have him in a couple of my money leagues, and I don't know. If I have better options, is this the time where you pivot away? You've had that one good week, and yes, Cooks is now out. So I have a hard time believing that, I am or you are probably going to sit Robert Woods, in the next couple of weeks. But, man, he's just killing you. He's killing you. So Josh Reynolds, I think, is a nice pickup. They are on a bye in week 9, so you won't get to play him next week, but you won't have to fight for him probably on the waiver wire. You won't have to spend your waiver priority. You can probably wait until Wednesday afternoon or Thursday and probably pick up Josh Reynolds for nothing this week, provided you have a bench place to stash him and you can hold on to him, and he might be pretty interesting in a couple of weeks, but we'll have to see. Gerald Everett didn't get as much work this week. 2 receptions on 3 targets, 15 yards. I'm still in the Gerald Everett is a part of this offense camp. I think that when they come back from the bye week, he's still going to be a tight end number 1 that you're going to want to play, and that's how I see him going for the rest of the regular season. So I think you play him. It wasn't a great week for him, but I still think you're going with Gerald Everett. I like him. He's just he's a big play guy, and if you watched a couple weeks ago against the Falcons, he almost made a few really big plays. Goff just missed him, so I think the potential's there, and you're going to play him. All right, let's move it on. Let's move it on quick. Let's go to New Orleans, where the Arizona Cardinals visited the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints handled them pretty easily, 31-9 in Drew Brees' return. It was great to see Drew Brees play great. I typically don't play, I don't usually play my fantasy players when they first come back from a serious injury. whether they're going to miss 4 or 5 plus weeks. I like to give them that week to get back and make sure that they look good, they look healthy. So I might have told you to sit Drew Brees if you had asked me this last week. And, hey, I don't want to say that was a wrong call, but he did have a great week. But we'll get there. Let's start with the Cardinals. There wasn't much to talk about this week, unfortunately. Kyler Murray, I think this is, the third, week at least, maybe fourth, without a touchdown. And that's getting very concerning. The rushing yards weren't there. 220 yards through the air. No touchdowns, no picks. Only 2 rushes for 13 yards. And the rushing here was a problem. I know they were behind, but really, it was 10-6 at the half. And there's really no reason to completely abandon the rush. However, outside of Kyler Murray and Christian Kirk, a wide receiver, they had 8 rushes on the day. So I know they were working with Chase Edmonds and Zach Denner, but I think Chase Edmonds proved that he is at least solid, if not a playmaker possibly in this league. And to only have 7, carries, I just don't see what the reasoning was. They weren't down big until really the fourth quarter, and there should have been a lot more rushes. I'm a little salty maybe because I played Chase Edmonds. Definitely cost me one of my games, but that was last week. But I'm still salty with him. So, not much happened on the ground in Arizona. Not much happened through the air in Arizona, unless you, for some miracle reason, played Charles Clay. But Christian Kirk did have a really good game, actually, coming back from his injury at 8 receptions on 11 targets, 79 yards. So, pretty big game for him there, just about 16 points at PPR. And he far outshined the rest of the receivers. There was not another Cardinals receiver with more than 18 yards receiving. That's 18 yards receiving. That includes Larry Fitzgerald. 2 receptions on 4 targets for 8 yards. And again, I don't know if you can play Larry Fitzgerald anymore right now. There's so many people out there producing points. And I know it's hard to see the guy that's been as consistent as Larry Fitzgerald was, but or is, I really should say. But I don't know. The offense doesn't look good. They caught a little fire. I think defensive coordinators are watching a little more film on Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury's offense, and I think they're picking it up a little bit better. I think you got to be worried about playing Arizona, pieces going forward in the near future. I do think Christian Kirk will have value as a volume, receiver. He won't score that much, I don't think, but he'll have some good volume and he'll be workable in PPR. And Kyler Murray, I do see dropping. I think right now he's the number 9 quarterback on the season. And I'm going to go with my gut from before the season and say that he doesn't wind up a QB1. Even with all the injuries to all the big QBs, I still think he might find himself outside of that top 12. But we're going to have to see. So tread lightly there. As I mentioned, welcome back, Drew Brees. 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. That was 34 completions on 43 attempts. So this guy doesn't miss a beat. I mean, he was out for 5 weeks. Team went 5-0. Come back and just right back to work. Now, they didn't have Alvin Kamara again for the second week in a row. And for the second week in a row, Latavius Murray absolutely crushed it. 21 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. 9 receptions on 12 targets, 55 yards, and a touchdown through the air. So Latavius Murray filling that Alvin Kamara role, not just on the ground, but through the air. 12 targets. I mean, there's always ways to look at this, right? I mean, they have a bye this upcoming week. That's great. It gives Kamara that week to get healthy and come back 100%. As a Kamara owner, you're absolutely worried. You're seeing Latavius Murray. He's killing it. So why wouldn't he get at least a few more looks when he comes back? I don't know. I mean, you love to see 12 targets to the running back, right? You're a Kamara owner. You say, geez, you give Alvin Kamara 10 plus targets, and he's probably going to have an absolute beast of a day. So it looks good from that perspective. But when your backup looks that good and has really played that well while you were out, it just makes me, just a little bit worried that he's going to take just a little bit more work away than he was before. Saints receivers, hey, Michael Thomas, no doubt he was great without Brees, which I wasn't sure if he was going to be. And he went right back to being great with Brees. 11 receptions on 11 targets, 112 yards and a touchdown. They continue their absolutely absurd completion percentage rate together. I think last year was like an astronomical 87% or something like that when they connected throughout the year. You're talking about 100 and something receptions. Just absolutely filthy. Their connection is great. That's just the greatness of Drew Brees and Michael Thomas. So not much else you can say there. Some of the other receivers got involved, but not enough. Not enough to really be workable for fantasy. You did get some points out of Taysom Hill. 3 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. Continues to make random big plays, but that's a dart throw if I've ever seen one. Ted Ginn, Josh Hill had three receptions for 39 yards on 5 targets. As a tight end, that's another dart throw. So, I think this is the way New Orleans Saints offense has been going for a little while. You can play, now you can. You should play Breeze every week. You're going to play Alvin Kamara, and right now, I think even when Kamara comes back, that you can play Latavius Murray as a flex guy, running back 3, kind of flex, maybe even, back end running back 2. Even with Kamara in the game, I think Murray's going to have, some value. And you're playing Michael Thomas, and that's probably it, from the Saints. So they have a bye this week, so just remember that. Saints, Rams, Falcons, some really good receivers, and some really good, skill pieces on bye this week. So make sure you're active out there and finding some people to play. Listen to our Week 9 preview shows coming up this week, and you'll get a little more information on who to play. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Let's go to Jacksonville. The New York Jets went to Jacksonville. They couldn't get it done. The Jaguars won 29-15. Looked pretty darn good doing it. The Jets looked a little bit better this week. Obviously, you'd expect that after playing New England. Sam Darnold, 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 3 picks, 8 sacks. When you get sacked 8 times, you're under pressure all day. That's definitely a part of the interceptions, and it's unfortunate that they're having trouble with their offensive line, but their schedule is getting to be in its best part right now for the Jets. A lot has been made about this Week 9 through 12 kind of stretch that they have. So if their pieces are going to be, viable, this is going to be it. Lev Bell, you're playing him based on volume, but he didn't even have volume in this game. They didn't run that many plays. They only had, 9 rushes by Le'Veon Bell, a few from other people. He went 9 for 23. He caught 3 balls on 5 targets for 12 yards. Now that is a team killer. That will kill your week if you're hoping for RB1 numbers and you get, 6.5 points. That's just brutal. It's brutal. It hurts. And Lev Bell's a guy I said don't draft before the season. He's not worth a first round, draft pick. It's just not going to happen. This is not a Pittsburgh offense. And until I see Lev Bell do it on a bad team, I'm just not going to believe it. So there you go. All right, through the air. Well, Demaryius Thomas, coming back, has a couple decent games. He caught all 5 of his targets for 63 yards. Not a huge game, but somebody that's now on the radar for a flex, kind of guy. There's, like I said, a lot of great receivers are on bye this week. So, if you're really hurting, do I think Demaryius Thomas is playable? Yes. I think he's playable if you're hoping for 10 to 15 points. I think you can play Demaryius Thomas. If you want more, then I don't think you can play a Jet, honestly. Robbie Anderson, mediocre as he has been. 4 receptions on 6 targets, 43 yards. Nothing to see here. Jamison Crowder, where did all the targets go? We were looking at 10, 12, 15 targets, I think some of us were hoping for. And nope, 3 receptions on 5 targets, 24 yards. So the only person here that had a good game was Ryan Griffin. 4 receptions on 4 targets, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he had both touchdowns in the game for the Jets. And I think all this does is give me confidence in Chris Herndon if he can get on the field, man. So please, Chris Herndon, please get on the field. I've got you stashed in a couple of leagues where I can really just use that shot of adrenaline. I think that's what he's going to be for Herndon owners. I think, he's just super talented, and I think Darnold needs that safety valve. So I think he's going to be big if he can get that hamstring healthy. He's going to be, a pretty good tight end going forward. All right, Jacksonville. Gardner Minshew got his groove back. How Gardner got his groove back, 279 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. You love to see that. Another 28 yards on the ground, so added a few points there. Really solid game for Gardner Minshew. You're really happy to see that at home. He had put together a couple of rough weeks, and this is what you wanted to see. So, even without some of his targets, D.D. Westbrook still, nursing that shoulder kind of neck injury. Was active, and so if you play D.D. Westbrook on that, he's active, man, that did not work out well for you. So let's start with Mr. Leonard Fournette. Continues to have a really, really solid season. A lot of it based on volume, but he's getting the job done and catching the ball much more and much better out of the backfield, and that's been the difference maker for Leonard Fournette. Bring him into that top tier. 19 carries, 76 yards, so 4.0 average, you're okay with that. Now let's put a little caveat to that. He had 76 yards on 19 carries, but 66 of that was on 1. So if you can do some quick math, that is 18 carries for 10 yards outside of that 1 rush. So just saying, the Jets D did a great job against the run. They gave up the 1 big play, but just for what it's worth, if you're a Jets fan, it makes you feel better that they did really well against the run, except for that 1 big play. But either way, he had the 1 big play, so he got what he needed. 7 receptions on 7 targets, 60 yards. That extra 13 points obviously made his game. That put him over 20, and you were thrilled with Leonard Fournette yet again on the season. He's just absolutely killing it for you. You're thrilled with where you drafted him. Right now he's the RB5 through week 8. A little bit lower than that in points per game, but still, he's an RB1 no matter how you look at it, and you got to be thrilled with your drafting of him. I was kind of off of Fournette. I still think that if Foles was the quarterback, I don't think Fournette would be having as good of a season, but I could be wrong. So either way, he is. So keep playing Leonard Fournette. Keep playing DJ Chark. 6 receptions on 12 targets. 79 yards and a touchdown. Love to see those 12 targets, your Chark owners. He is a wide receiver 1. Not only is he actually a wide receiver 1, which he is on the year, but he's a wide receiver 1 in the league right now. As long as Gardner Minshew is throwing the ball for Jacksonville, you got to play DJ Chark as a number 1. As long as the matchup isn't absolutely brutal, got to keep him in there. Another big story here, Chris Conley with D.D. Westbrook not able to go, Marquise Lee injured, going on IR. Chris Conley stepped up big, 4 receptions on 7 targets, 103 yards and a touchdown. And I think, yes, Chris Conley is absolutely somebody you need to pick up and roster, but I don't think you need to start him yet. You need to just track what happens with D.D. Westbrook. If D.D. Westbrook plays, Conley's stock certainly goes down. So do the expectations. It becomes much more boom or bust than it is if Westbrook's not in there. So keep an eye on that. I think you want to roster Conley because you don't know what's going on with Westbrook. Shoulder, neck stuff can always be, re-aggravated. So go ahead and roster him. And if Westbrook is out, yes, I think you can play Conley as that flex wide receiver 3. But I wouldn't play him. I just keep him rostered if D.D. Westbrook looks healthy coming up. All right. Nothing to see here as far as tight ends go for Jacksonville. So we're going to move on. We're going to keep it rolling. I don't want to keep you here all day. All right. What do we got? Oh, goodness. Let's see. The San Francisco 49ers welcomed the Carolina Panthers to the Golden State and absolutely whooped them. 51-13, and the game wasn't even that close. San Francisco ran the ball like they do on everybody. 232 yards rushing. Absolute beast mode for this Kyle Shanahan-led rushing offense. They played against a not too bad running back himself and Christian McCaffrey, who had himself a day. Let's start with Kyle Allen. So Kyle Allen went for 158, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. If you're playing the quarterback streaming game and you played Kyle Allen over some of these other guys like Gardner Minshew and Ryan Tannehill, you were very, very unhappy with the result. Brutal day for Kyle Allen. They were playing from behind all game, so I get it. The defense was just playing, just playing easy D back there and sitting on him. So that's kind of where the picks came. But still, that's just brutal. Right now, San Francisco's defense is just locking people up. And if you're looking at playing, offensive, you're looking at playing pass catching weapons against San Fran, I mean, you're really rolling the dice here. Christian McCaffrey continued to kill it. 14 carries, 117 yards, and a touchdown. So, he's just crushing it. Christian McCaffrey is the number one running back on the season. He's the number one running back in my heart and in one of my leagues. So, yeah, I think it's great. At this point, he's so durable. I don't think you really have to roster his handcuff. Not the way I would roster Dalvin Cook's handcuff or Saquon Barkley's handcuff. I think those two guys, it's a little bit more important, I think. We already know Latavius Murray's own, so I can't tell you to go out and get him. But at this point, I'm not thinking about getting Christian McCaffrey's handcuff, whether it's Reggie Bonifant or Jordan Scarlett. I'm just not worried about it. Moving over to the wide receivers, Curtis Samuel continued to get a lot of targets, 11 targets, so he led the team. 4 receptions, 46 yards. That was fine. The 11 targets you like. And if you had to play him, you got just enough points where he didn't hurt you. But he's still a guy that's just on my bench. He's just sitting there. And he's not playing. He's just sitting on my bench. So he has to be rostered. But you're not playing him unless you're really thin. DJ Moore, another 9 targets, but only 5 receptions, 38 yards. So another guy that's getting the targets. It's just the playmaking's not there for Kyle Allen right now. And I think when and if Cam Newton comes back, I think both Samuel and DJ Moore become, a little bit more playable as a wide receiver 2 for DJ Moore and a wide receiver 3/flex for Curtis Samuel. But right now, I'd be playing DJ Moore and probably not playing Curtis Samuel. If you're asking me, that's where I'd be going while Kyle Allen remains the quarterback. Greg Olsen still didn't really get much done with Kyle Allen. 2 targets, 2 receptions, 13 yards. If you're playing Greg Olsen still, it's just you're hoping for the old Greg Olsen, and I don't know if it's him or the quarterbacks or whoever. All I know is he's not getting points, and he's not on my team. He's not starting on any of my teams. So that's just how that goes. San Fran's running backs. Well, let's start with Jimmy G. Handsome Jimmy Garoppolo, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So not a bad day on 22 attempts. That's what you're going to get when you run the ball the way San Francisco can run the ball and the way they want to run the ball. You're not going to have a ton of attempts. I actually am streaming Jimmy G in one of my leagues in week 9 here. It's a little bit risky, but I think with the Emmanuel Sanders addition and the matchup, I think it's okay, but we'll get into that on the preview show. But Jimmy G played pretty well here. If you did stream him, you were okay. If you played him, you got just enough to be happy. If you played Tevin Coleman, you got more than enough to be happy. You ate like Thanksgiving feast style. 11 carries, 105 yards, and 3 touchdowns. If that wasn't enough, 2 receptions, 13 yards, and another touchdown. Yeah, so if you can count, that's 4 touchdowns on the day. He touched the ball 13 times. 1 out of every 3 times he had the ball in his hands, he found himself in the end zone. That is just sick. So I don't know. I mean, obviously here's the problem with this backfield, right? So Tevin Coleman got 11 carries. Raheem Mostert got 9. Matt Breida got 11. So you can't trust Tevin Coleman to get the ball in the end zone, 4 times when he touches the ball 13 times. So it's hard to say that, yeah, you have to play him. At the same time, this team runs the ball so well, and this Kyle Shanahan scheme runs the ball so well, that it's almost impossible to say not to play at least 2 running backs on the Niners every week. Now, they have a short week. They are very injury... they're really feeling the injury bug here in the running back position. Both Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert are questionable to play on Thursday. And if that leaves just Tevin Coleman and Jeff Wilson, yes, you can play Jeff Wilson. I'm just telling you. If both of those guys are out, if they're not playing on Thursday, Breida and Mostert, if they're out, you can play Jeff Wilson. You're definitely playing Tevin Coleman, but you can play Jeff Wilson. if Breida's out and Mostert's in, you can play Mostert. That's just how it goes. You can play 2 running backs on San Francisco every week at this point, and you can even take a dart throw at a third. In all honesty, they're scoring so many touchdowns, but no, you can definitely play 2. Just consider that if you're looking for running backs and you need depth, and you're one of those people that says, I don't want a number 2 running back on a team that might only get 10 carries. 10 49ers carries are not the same as everyone else's carries. Just keep that in mind. As far as receiving options go, let's talk about the new guy first, because he actually led the receivers in receiving. Emmanuel Sanders, 4 receptions on 5 targets, 25 yards and a touchdown. He had that early touchdown. Nice to see him getting involved early. I think Emmanuel Sanders is going to be very good for this offense. He's going to be very good for Jimmy G. How good is he going to be for fantasy football owners? That I'm not really sure about. I think expectations need to be tempered, because this is an offense that wants to run the ball a ton. So if they're going to run the ball as much as I think they're going to, the volume really is going to be there. I don't see a lot of 10-plus target kind of games, and therefore I'm looking at him as a wide receiver 3, flex appeal kind of a guy until further notice. I'm also not playing any other 49ers receivers other than George Kittle. Another big game. 6 receptions, 86 yards on 7 targets. So you're playing George Kittle. You drafted him high. You pretty much have to play him. Not that it's a bad thing. I'm just saying you drafted him high. You're going to play him. So that's it. As far as receivers go, I'm playing Emmanuel Sanders, playing George Kittle. That's it for my 49ers. So that game was ugly, man. 51-13. That's just gross. So we're gonna keep it moving. Let's go up to New England, where the Patriots hosted the Cleveland Browns, the off-season darling Cleveland Browns that are now 2-5 after losing to the Patriots 27-13. Just couldn't get it going again. Baker Mayfield, 194 yards, a touchdown and a pick against, right now is the best defense in the league. So hard to really fault him for that. He was sacked 5 times. Nick Chubb, however, did go off. He had, costly fumble there, but, costly fumbles there, but 20 carries for 131 yards, continues to look like an absolute beast on the ground. He only had 1 reception for 7 yards. It didn't add much there. And then the 2 fumbles definitely, kind of hurt his totals for the day. But he just looks great. And I think this adds to the narrative that you don't have to be too worried about Kareem Hunt being more than a typical second running back share of the workload. So I don't see it being close to 50-50 once Kareem Hunt comes out. I definitely see it being more of a 70-30 kind of a split, with Chubb getting the majority of the work. And as long as that's the case, then Chubb is definitely an RB1. But if Hunt comes in and takes a lot of that work, then we'll have to reassess it then. But for now, Chubb is a plug-and-play RB1. On the outside, another one of those games where Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. had very, very similar stat lines. Even though they weren't drafted in very similar places, they both had 5 receptions, 65 yards for Landry, 52 for Beckham. Neither one got in the end zone. Landry actually had 3 more targets, 10 targets, but, as the short yardage, kind of receiver, you expect him to have more targets, but you'd expect Beckham to have the bigger plays. It's just not going that way right now. And we're hearing, OBJ's comments were taken, I think, a little bit too sensitively. I don't think he was really complaining. I think he was just venting just a little bit, not too much. But, I think at this point you're going to play both of those guys probably, because volume's there, the targets are there. This team wants to be a good offense, right? Baker Mayfield wants to take chances and wants to be, a stud quarterback. So I'm going to keep watching and keep waiting. Those are the only 2 guys I'm playing outside of Nick Chubb. So if I have Cleveland Browns, I'm not playing Baker Mayfield right now at all. But of course you're playing Nick Chubb. You're playing Odell Beckham Jr. And, you should be playing Jarvis Landry probably in that flex spot. So just keep that in mind going forward. New England, Tom Brady, another very just workmanlike Tom Brady type of day. Didn't have to work too hard. They were up big early. 259 yards through the air with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no surprise there. So nice workmanlike day for him. His fantasy owners are very happy with his performance so far. As far as on the season goes, Tom Brady is like, he's quarterback number 6, and you're thrilled with that. Now that's overall, that's not points per game. Per game, he's a little further down there, 7, 8, 9. He's like quarterback 10 points per game. But listen, quite frankly, I had him, I think, as a preseason ranking like number 17. So I was way off, and hey, I'm okay with being off. I have him on a couple of teams, so I'm happy with that, and we'll see what happens the rest of the year. We also had injuries, to a lot of big names that I had ahead of him: Andrew Luck, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger. A lot of stuff happened, but either way, he's playing well. He's doing well with the minimal weapons that he has. Sony Michel continues to get volume and not do that much with it. 21 carries, 74 yards, no big plays, not breaking a lot of tackles. So he's a volume play. He's a guy that you expect to get, maybe some goal line looks, most games. So you want to play Sony Michel, but it's hard to. It's hard to. He's not making anything happen. He's not doing anything to look better. Everything he gets, those are the holes that are there. He's not making more happen. So I'd like to see him break some tackles for once. Let's go, Sony. All right, as far as the receivers go, this has been the touchy point for the Patriots. Julian Edelman had a big game, 8 receptions on 11 targets, 78 yards, but got in the end zone twice, so he had a really big game for you. And Edelman's the wide receiver 1 in this offense. He'll be, plug and play, wide receiver 1 for you for the rest of the year. James White did what James White does. He had 4 receptions on 5 targets for 75 yards. That's basically his game. He didn't have many carries. He had 2 carries for 4 yards. So this is the problem with James White. First thing is that he's only playable in PPR. 75 yards isn't bad, but you're usually not going to have that on 4 receptions. But typically for James White, you're looking for 6+ receptions and maybe 60 yards. And that's how you're getting your points in PPR, 12, 13 points a week. But just know that's it. That's what you're getting. You're getting 12 to 15 points almost every week, and maybe he finds his way into the end zone and you get close to that 20-point mark. But, James White is a great, consistent, high-floor play, and that's how you should look at him going forward. If you're in PPR, you can feel like you're going to get your 10 points, and you can feel pretty confident about that. So that's how I look at him. Dorsett, 3 receptions, 43 yards. Sanu, first game, I like to see the 5 targets, 2 receptions, 23 yards. I view Philip Dorsett and Mohamed Sanu in a very similar ranking tier, as a kind of a high-end wide receiver 3, to low-end, kind of flex guy. So these guys are like so many other guys in the league right now that any week can give you 6 points, but also can give you, 16 points. Never going to have these monster weeks, but you're just trying to find that right week where they score, and instead of getting 7 points, you get those 14 points, right? So I think Sanu is going to be a sneaky play going forward. We'll see what his connection is like with Brady, but obviously Brady is starving for weapons, and we'll see what he can do with Sanu. Ben Watson is still not playable. No tight ends are playable right now for New England. So we're going to go ahead and move on, try to get these last few games out of the way here. So, Houston Texans welcome the Oakland Raiders down to Houston. Really close game here. Houston had a comeback in the fourth quarter to win this game, which they did. But it was a really, really interesting game, and it was a fun game to watch. If you watch this game, it was pretty interesting, and Oakland was in it like they've been in a lot of games this year. Oakland's 3-4. They're really not a bad team, and I think they're surprising a lot of people. And I think John Gruden needs to get a lot of the credit. He got a lot of crap last year, getting rid of Khalil Mack, a lot of what seemed like very questionable moves on the surface. Then the Antonio Brown saga, or tragedy, whatever you want to call it. And here we are, and they're 3-4. They just almost beat the Texans on the road, and this is a pretty good team. Derek Carr had a pretty good day, 285 yards and 3 touchdowns. A lot of people had him picked as a good stream this week, and they were definitely right. He had a really good game, and he's looking pretty solid right now. He's got a little connection with Tyrell Williams, who's back from injury. He's got a little connection with Hunter Renfrow. They're making some nice little plays underneath happen. Obviously, Darren Waller is a beast, and he loves Darren Waller. He loves tight ends. That's just kind of how it is. So Derek Carr, I think going forward is a really interesting person. I expect him to be streamed almost every week for the next few weeks while we have more teams on a bye. I think you'll see him play, and I think he's a very viable play. Josh Jacobs, pretty decent game for him as far as the volume goes. You didn't have a great game, but you're glad to see him on the field. 15 carries, 66 yards. Only 2 receptions for 15 yards. You'd like to see a little more work out of there, but hey, you got over 10 points. He didn't kill you. It was all right. You were fine with it. Josh Jacobs is still a guy you're going to play as an RB2 going forward. So there you go. Tyrell Williams. What do you do with Tyrell Williams? The guy just scores touchdowns. Seems like he scores every game he's in there, whether or not he has a lot of targets. This game, he actually did pace the wide receivers in targets for Oakland with 6 targets. 3 receptions, 91 yards, and that touchdown. So, it's hard to ignore him anymore as a guy that's a wide receiver 3. I think at this point, you're playing him. I think a lot of people picked him up early, right? He started out hot, so you picked him up week 2, week 3. Then he cooled off, and now he's heating back up. So a lot of people are kind of off him, but I think you need to get back on him. I know it sounds bad, but go ahead and get back on Tyrell Williams, all right? Hunter Renfrow caught all 4 of his targets, 88 yards and a long touchdown, so good for him. He's, really playing that, that underneath crossing route kind of guy. He's playing it really well. We know Derek Carr doesn't usually air the ball out that much, so Renfrow makes sense as a target for him. So there you go. I think those are the only 2, receiving options you can look at playing right now, on that team. Obviously, aside from Darren Waller, when I say receiving options, I mean wide receivers. Darren Waller had he struggled this game. He did get in the end zone, but he had 8 targets. So that's what you want to see, 8 targets. That means, usually you're going to have a much better game than that. 2 receptions, 11 yards, but he got in the end zone. Thankfully, got in the end zone. You got your 9 points. That's okay. You can live with 9 points. That's all right. Deshaun Watson gave you a lot more than 9 points. Deshaun Watson, 279 and 3 touchdowns, no picks, taking good care of the ball. Only sacked 3 times. I know it's 3 times, but for Houston, that's a good number. 3 sacks. You kind of take it and say, okay, that's not that bad. Considering we threw the ball 39 times. For that offensive line, you take the 3 sacks. So big game for Watson. Added 46 yards on the ground. So he had another monster game. I mean, he's having a great season. He's right up there. He really is, the number 1 quarterback on the year as far as points go. He is the number 2 quarterback in points per game, only second to Lamar Jackson. So having a great season. You drafted him as probably the number 4 to number 6, ish quarterback, and you're getting great return on that, even if you drafted him in the 5th round or something like that. So you're thrilled with Deshaun Watson. Keep rolling, keep riding that train. Carlos Hyde continues to be a solid volume play. 19 carries, 83 yards. So if you're in standard or PPR, you can play Carlos Hyde. I think he has more value in standard actually right now because of the volume and the lack of receiving targets. He's definitely a better play in standard, but you can play him in PPR because running back is so thin, and with all these bye weeks, a guy that's going to get 15 plus carries a game almost without fail, if not 20, is a guy you need to have in your offense. This team likes to throw the ball deep. It's inevitable they're going to have the ball down by the goal line occasionally, and you want to have the running back who has the ball on the 1 yard line. So I think Carlos Hyde is a sneaky play. I like him as an upside guy for the last handful of weeks here. The receivers in Houston, so, DeAndre Hopkins did his thing, 11 more receptions on 13 targets, 109 yards. Didn't find the end zone, but still had a big game. You're always happy with that kind of production from DeAndre Hopkins. The big disappointment here was Kenny Stills. Ton of people picked him up after the Will Fuller injury, expecting Kenny Stills to walk right into that Will Fuller role. He had 5 targets this game, but only 3 receptions, 22 yards, so if you picked him up and played him, you were disappointed. You were hoping for that big kind of bust out week, new receiver. You didn't get it. You weren't happy about that. If you played Duke Johnson, as a flex guy, you got a touchdown. So you were happy. He had 4 receptions, 33 yards, and a touchdown. Hey, 13 and change, you always take that out of somebody that you're plugging in. Always take 13 and change when you're plugging somebody in. I think Duke Johnson is another guy. It's all about what you're expecting out of him. If you're expecting 7 to 10 to 12 points in PPR, and that's what your team needs that week, then you can play Duke Johnson. If you're expecting more than that, don't do it. Look for a guy with higher ceiling. It's not Duke Johnson. Tight ends, this is going to be one of the most popular pickups of the week for tight ends, or for any position, honestly, is Darren Fells. Darren Fells has been scoring touchdowns on a regular basis. He's seeing targets on a regular basis. He caught all 6 of his targets, 58 yards, and 2 out of Deshaun Watson's 3 touchdowns, both of those in the fourth quarter to complete that comeback and get the win. So Darren Fells is obviously becoming somebody that Deshaun Watson trusts, because it's not just about targets, it's about the value of targets. And when this is the guy you're looking for in the red zone, in the fourth quarter, when you're down, I know you trust him. So I love that. I'm picking up Darren Fells in a couple of leagues. I'm going to trot him out there and see what happens. And hey, if you've been playing TJ Hawkinson, if you've been playing Vance McDonald, or you've been playing some of these guys, then why not? Why not play Darren Fells? You can't go wrong, right? There's no wrong answer when you're getting 2 or 3 points out of your tight end. Then there's no wrong answer. Pick anybody. But I'm going to give Darren Fells a shot, and I'm going to see what he does with it. So we'll see. We'll see. All right. Looks like that might have been the end of the early games on Sunday. What do we have here? Yeah, let's go to Sunday night. Exciting game on Sunday night. The Green Bay Packers went to the Patrick Mahomes-less Kansas City Chiefs and beat them on the road 31-24, bringing them up to 7-1, dropping KC to 5-3. The 7-1 Green Bay Packers are looking great. Right now, they are rolling. You know, it's a new offense, new head coach, right? Matt LaFleur. Sometimes it takes a few weeks. It looks like that's the case here. You have Aaron Rodgers really hitting his stride. Aaron Jones is going berserker style on a weekly basis. Jamal Williams is finding the end zone on a regular basis. And they're just making it happen with what they have out there. And this is without Devontae Adams for the last, 4 weeks or so. And they're just killing it. So I love playing Packers right now. Aaron Rodgers, 305 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's rolling. Keep playing him. He looks great. He's making these amazing, amazing passes. You all know what I'm talking about this last week. That off the back foot fadeaway into the corner, ridiculousness that Jamal Williams caught. Let's talk about the backfield. Aaron Jones continues to get it done on the ground and through the air. 13 carries, 67 yards, so not a huge game on the ground, although a 5.2 yard per carry average. You love to see that. However, 7 catches out of 8 targets, 159 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He outran the whole defense on that one play. I mean, just ran past everybody. He was like, yeah, I'm gone. So great to see that if you're an Aaron Jones owner. I told everybody, listen, I was big on Aaron Jones in the preseason and in the offseason, and told everyone this is the guy that should be drafted near the end of that first round. Not Gurley, not David Johnson, not Joe Mixon. Aaron Jones is the guy that needs to be drafted, in that area, and he wasn't. I've got a couple of shares in him, and I am loving it. So you're playing Aaron Jones. Now the question is, are you playing Jamal Williams? That's really the question, because he is finding the end zone on a regular basis. All right, so there were 4 offensive touchdowns scored by Green Bay in this game. 2 were by Aaron Jones. 2 were by Jamal Williams. So he only had 7 carries, which was, hey, by the way, not only that was, more than half of what Aaron Jones had, 13-7, 22 yards, but he did get the touchdown. But then he also caught 3 passes, 14 yards, and a touchdown, that beautiful touchdown. What do you say? I think that you can play Jamal Williams. I think I'm willing to say that he's, he is a little bit touchdown dependent, but he's scoring touchdowns. They're scoring points, and he's scoring touchdowns. So, Aaron Jones is a must play, and Jamal Williams you can play. As far as receivers, it's tough to trust anybody. Aaron Rodgers is doing such a good job of spreading the ball around right now that it's hard to trust just one receiver. None of these, kind of off-named guys have really done much with it. Jake Kumaro, 2 receptions, 48 yards. Alan Lazard, 5 receptions, 42 yards. I guess that's playable, but if you're looking for 9.2 points, come on. I hope you're not looking for 9.2 points. You can get that anywhere. So that's pretty stressful. Geronimo Allison, 1 catch on 3 targets. MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 1 catch on 2 targets. I told someone to play MVS. I don't even remember who it was over, but it was wrong, obviously. So I don't know until Devontae Adams comes back. So right now, if I got Green Bay Packers, you're playing the Aarons, Rodgers, and Jones. I think you can play Jamal Williams as a flex play with, kind of tight end, touchdown upside. You need that touchdown. If you're thinking he's going to get it, you play Jamal Williams. Outside of that, I don't play any other Green Bay Packers until Devontae Adams comes back at full health. I think the rest of these guys are too much of just a big question mark, right? And it's a touchdown or bust kind of a game for all of these guys, and there's too many other players out there getting big targets. You can get a Preston Williams, and I know that sounds gross, but I'll take Preston Williams over Marcus Valdez-Scantling right now every week, not even close. All right, let's go to Kansas City quickly. Matt Moore had a decent game, 267 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not a bad game for the kid. Not enough to win the game, but not bad. He is not so much in the streaming category for me, mostly because I think Mahomes will be back in a week or two. So if you need a 1 week plug, maybe you can look at him. But at Baltimore, I think they are next week. I have no interest in that, honestly. But so I leave Matt Moore where he is. Did a decent job for 1 week. Good for him. As far as the running backs go, I still think you can play LaShawn McCoy just because he's getting the most volume right now, so that when Patrick Mahomes comes back, I think McCoy's going to have the most value. 9 carries, 40 yards. We did have 4 receptions, 23 yards, so it wasn't a great game, but he got over that 10-point threshold in PPR. Didn't kill you, but didn't really help you. But I still think he's the one to own. Damian Williams did find his way into the end zone this game, but he had 7 carries, 30 yards. With that touchdown, no targets in the air, so Damian Williams is a guy that has to stay on the waiver wire. He has to stay as a free agent for me for a while. LaShawn McCoy is the only rostered running back for KC for me. That's the only guy that should be on your team. But I still wouldn't be playing him every week unless I have to, LaShawn McCoy. So let's look at the receivers. Tyreek Hill led the way in targets with 9 targets, caught 6 of them for 76 yards. So pretty good game for Tyreek Hill. You're happy to see the targets. You're just waiting for Mahomes to come back, but you're playing him every week. Sammy Watkins came back a little bit today, 8 targets. So you love to see the 8 targets, 5 receptions, 45 yards. There's a lot of talk about how good will Sammy Watkins be once Patrick Mahomes comes back. Will he be a high-end wide receiver 2, or will he be more of a wide receiver 3 flex guy? I think he's going to be more of a wide receiver 3 flex guy with 1 or 2 big games, and I'm not willing to gamble on when those games are coming. I think right now Mecole Hardman, who you see, had 2 receptions, 55 yards, and another big touchdown. He's another big play guy, so I think that just takes a little bit of that value away from Sammy Watkins, and I'm not interested in him. Travis Kelce finally got back in the end zone, 8 targets, 4 receptions, 63 yards. And listen, this is another guy that, he had a good game. You're happy with that. He hasn't had a lot of them this year. They haven't been bad. It just hasn't been Travis Kelce-like. Let's hope when Mahomes comes back, they continue that connection they've had for the last year, and we can get Travis Kelce back to elite levels. Because people have drafted him sometimes in the late first round, but definitely by the late second round. And, I think they deserve just a little bit more for their draft pick. Oh, here we go. Last game. Whew. Man, all right. Let's see. This game was interesting for the first half. It was fun. We thought the Dolphins might get their first win. The Miami Dolphins went to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers, and the Steelers wound up winning 27-14, improving to 3-4, of course, sending the Dolphins to 0-7. There's a couple of winless teams though, so it's not just the Dolphins. We'll see in the race to Tua what happens. But this actually, I don't think they're tanking. These are professionals. They have pride. It's just not a great collection of talent. They're selling people off, but I really think that the guys that are out there obviously are trying to win and they're playing hard. They're just overmatched most of these weeks. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I have no interest in playing Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I do have interest in other Dolphins as long as Ryan Fitzpatrick remains the quarterback. So Mark Walton is now the number 1 running back in Miami. It seems Kenyon Drake has been traded to the Arizona Cardinals. We'll talk a little bit about that in our Week 9 preview. But Mark Walton got 11 more carries, only 35 yards, so certainly not a great game. But he did have 6 targets, 3 receptions, 19 yards. I think Mark Walton, at the end of the day, at this time of the year in fantasy football, it's very rare that you can find a number 1 running back on any team, no matter how bad, a guy that's going to get possibly 15 to 20 touches of the ball every game. And as long as you're going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times, you have a spot on my bench, and I'll wait to see what happens and if you're any good. But I think that Mark Walton needs to be rostered in 100% of leagues just because there's so few guys out there that ever just become available halfway through the season, more than halfway through the fantasy season, that have this kind of volume potential. So go ahead and grab him. I think you can play him in Week 9, but we'll talk about that in the preview show. Either way, he had a decent game. He had the targets, the receptions. He probably wasn't played by almost anybody, so he's the Miami running back to play going forward, in my opinion. The receivers, listen, the 2 guys we've been talking about, they did what they've been doing, right? Devontae Parker, I know people, he's just one of those guys. He burned people for years now. He's still young, though. It feels like he's been burning people for a decade. But he's still a young guy, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 59 yards. As long as Ryan Fitzpatrick is the quarterback, I like Devontae Parker as a wide receiver 3. This guy's going to score 11, 12 points every game. It looks like he's going to get either in the end zone or he's going to have 6 or 7 yards. He might score 20 points any given week. I think you got to play him. To a lesser extent, I like having Preston Williams coming into all these bye weeks with all these big wide receivers that are going to be off. Preston Williams is a very playable guy, 7 more targets, 4 receptions, 42 yards, and he looks the part. When you see him out there, he's just a really big, fast, and strong dude that looks really hard to cover. I don't want to cover him. So I think you can play him as a flex guy, especially with these weeks coming up with all these bye weeks. After that, it doesn't go anywhere. I do want to mention Allen Hurns. He only had the 1 reception for 12 yards, but if you saw it, that was a really, really hard-fought touchdown. He went beast mode to get the ball in, and it's just nice to see Allen Hurns out there after a couple of really bad injuries. Just good to see you out there, man. I'm just happy for you. Happy you got in the end zone. Happy you're out there healthy. And, I'm not picking you up. I'm sorry. I'm not picking you up. But I just wanted to reach out and say how good it is to see that you are back on the field and playing well. So, if you're looking at Dolphins, yes, I think you want to play Devontae Parker. I think you can play Preston Williams. And I think you can play Mark Walton. So stay tuned for Miami. They're not going to win much, but I think they're going to be fantasy viable. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers, last team of the week. All right, Mason Rudolph, 251, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Not a bad game, not a great game. We'd like to see a little bit more against a team like Miami at home. Didn't do much for the first 2.5 quarters. Started to turn it on a little bit after that. I think he's a tough guy to stream. He doesn't look great most weeks. He is, making it come together and scoring just enough points. But I don't like it. I just don't like the way it looks, really. James Conner had a great game. 23 carries, 145 yards on the ground with a touchdown. He also added 3 receptions, only 5 yards. That's 3.5 points on top of an already big game. Now, however, James Conner is injured. I think he sprained the MCL joint in his shoulder, maybe? I am no doctor. I could be making all of that up. Either way, he said it's possible he plays on Sunday. He's going to do whatever's best for the team. Good, players speak there. But if he's out there and he's healthy, you got to play him. Right now, Jalen Samuels, practiced all week, but was a healthy scratch, so I think he is ready to go. Benny Snell Jr. is a little bit banged up also, so I think they need James Conner. They're 3-4, and they need James Conner, so if he's healthy, you got to play him. Juju Smith-Schuster had a big game, 5 receptions, 9 targets, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Juju owners rejuice. No, rejuice. Did you get it? All right, no, rejoice. Finally, no, a big game for Juju. You needed it. Now, a lot of fantasy owners were going into Monday night, I'm sure, down some points and really stressing if Juju was going to, lay an egg. But he didn't. He had a really good game. So I think he played Juju with confidence right now, with Mason Rudolph, and hopefully he can put together some more games like this. Deontay Johnson had that, that last touchdown, not the last touchdown, but right before the half. 5 receptions, 84 yards on 7 targets, and that 1 touchdown. He is the obvious number 2 here. I think that on any given week he is, low-end wide receiver 3 kind of flex option, and he has this kind of upside with that big play. But let's be honest here, that was an awful defensive call. He beat the defense, and I am not really interested in playing him unless I have, 2 or 3 guys on a bye, coming up in these next couple of weeks, which definitely could be because there's, 4 and 6 teams on byes, right? So unless I've got a lot of guys on byes, I'm not really looking at Deontay Johnson as more than a boom or bust kind of a guy. Vance McDonald, 3 receptions on 4 targets, 19 yards. Nothing to see here, folks. I can't play Vance McDonald as a tight end. I had, really high hopes for him when the season started, but it hasn't panned out that way. All right. That's going to do it. That's all the games, man. That's a lot of games, a lot of stuff, a lot of action happened in Week 8. Man, we're in the thick of it. If it's Week 8 in most of your fantasy leagues, right, most of them, there's only about, maybe 6 games left, 5 or 6 games left before the playoffs. And this is when you're making your push. You got to start thinking about handcuffs. If you have Dalvin Cook, you have Zeke Elliott, some of these guys, maybe you make a roster spot for their handcuff. Because let me tell you, if you lose your number 1 guy, not only does it only behoove you to have their backup because they're going to score points like Latavius Murray is, but you keep him away from somebody else. And that could be a league winner for somebody that already has Aaron Jones and Chris Carson and now adds, Alexander Madison after Dalvin Cook goes out. So keep an eye on that. We're getting to that point of the year. I know there's still a lot of bye weeks coming up, but it's just about time to start looking forward. If you have, a really good team right now, if you have a 6-2 team, maybe you start thinking about playoffs. But no matter what record your team is, remember, as I always say, make sure you play your team. Make sure you get your bye week and your injured guys out of your lineup. At least try to play the best version of your team that you have and play guys that are in. At least show the other owners in your league that respect. Play your team. Do the right thing, right? Do it. All right, that's going to do it for us today. I want to thank you very much for joining us again here on the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast with your host, Jim Neander. Don't forget to find us on Twitter. You can find us at the GOAT FF Podcast or at Jim Neander. So go ahead and find us on Twitter, watch the videos on YouTube, and be ready for the next couple of days. We're going to be sending out our Week 9 preview shows. Lots of great matchups, lots of great players on bye weeks. You need to know who to start and who to sit. So you hit me up and let me know on Twitter. I'm glad to help you out, but make sure you watch the episode. That'll give you all the info you need. Till next time, have a good one. See you soon.